In the summer of 2016, a man named Joel and his younger brother Caleb took a 2-week sailing trip along the coast of Maine. Both were experienced sailors. Joel had been doing coastal trips since his 20s, and Caleb had crewed on longer offshore passages. This was supposed to be a relaxed trip. Familiar waters. Low stakes. They were 9 days in when the fog came. It rolled in fast on a Wednesday evening, the way North Atlantic fog does. Not gradually, not as a warning, just suddenly there, thick and total, reducing visibility to almost nothing within 20 minutes. They dropped anchor in what their charts showed as a clear stretch of water about 4 miles from the nearest listed island and decided to wait it out overnight. Joel woke at around 2 a.m. to the sound of the hull scraping something. Not a collision, not a crash, a slow, deliberate scraping along the port side. About astern, like something long and submerged was dragging itself against the boat. He was on deck in seconds. Caleb, right behind him. What would you do in this situation? Type your thoughts in the comment section, subscribe, and give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it so far. The fog was still thick. Their anchor light cast a pale glow about 10 feet in every direction. Beyond that, nothing. Just gray, but they were no longer in open water. The anchor chain was taut at an angle they hadn't set it, and on the port side, just barely visible through the fog, was land. Dark, tree-covered, close enough that Joel could have thrown a stone and hit the tree line. An island, maybe 200 meters across, dense with old growth. No lights, no structures visible. Joel pulled out the chart. He checked their GPS position. According to every reference he had, there was no island at those coordinates. Nothing. Open water. He told Caleb to stay on deck while he went back below to cross-reference a second chart. An older paper one he kept as backup. He found their position. Checked again. And there, on the older chart, the one printed in 1987, was a small marking. Just a dot, no name, with a single notation beside it in small type. The notation read, reported, unverified, nothing else. No name. No history, just those 2 words. They decided not to explore. Joel wanted to pull anchor and move as soon as there was enough light. Caleb agreed. They sat on deck, watching the tree line, waiting for dawn. At around 4 a.m., Caleb grabbed Joel's arm. There was a light on the island. Not a torch, a soft, steady glow, orangey white, moving slowly through the trees parallel to the shoreline. Moving at walking pace, it passed from left to right across their entire field of vision, never stopping, never flickering. Then it disappeared into the interior of the island and didn't come back. At first light, they pulled anchor and sailed. Joel spent the following 2 days trying to find any historical record of that island. Maritime records, geological surveys, fishing charts going back to the 1800s. He found 3 separate references in old fishermen's logs, all describing a small, unnamed island in roughly that position, all with the same note attached in different words. Stay away at night. None of the logs explain why. Joel still sails those waters. He has never found the island again. His GPS shows nothing but open water at those exact coordinates every time he's passed through. He has never found an explanation for the light in the trees. He has never fully stopped looking for one either. If you're watching this and you're getting that particular feeling, the one where you're suddenly very aware of how dark it is outside your window, then this channel is working exactly as intended. Do me a favor and subscribe right now if you haven't already. It takes 2 seconds and it keeps stories like these coming every single week. I genuinely appreciate every one of you who's here. 2 more stories, both worse than the last. Stay with me. Lake Ronkonkoma sits in the middle of Long Island, New York. It is the largest natural lake on Long Island, roughly a mile across, and it is extraordinarily deep for its size. Estimates vary, but some measurements suggest it drops to over 80 feet in places, with a bottom that has never been fully mapped. It also has a history, a long, documented, deeply uncomfortable history of drownings. More drownings per year for over a century than almost any comparable body of water in the northeastern United States. Local historians have written about it. Newspapers have covered it. The Unkechaug Nation, whose ancestral land surrounds the lake, have their own explanations, old ones passed down carefully, that the township has largely chosen not to repeat in official literature. This story was submitted to me by a man named Dennis, who grew up on the lake's south shore and worked as a volunteer with the local dive rescue team for 6 years in the early 2000s. Dennis told me that every experienced diver on that team had a rule. An unofficial one, never written down, never explained to newcomers until they'd done enough dives to be trusted with it. The rule was this: below 40 feet, you do not look toward the center of the lake. You keep your eyes on whatever you came down for: a recovery, a line check, a debris survey. And when you ascend facing the shore. Not the center, never the center. Dennis asked on his third dive why. The senior diver, a retired firefighter named Lou who had been diving Ronkonkoma for 15 years, looked at him for a long moment and then said, "Because once you see what's down there looking back at you, you don't get back in." Dennis told me he assumed it was hazing. New guy stuff. He laughed it off. On his 11th dive, a recovery operation, late October, water temperature around 50 degrees, Dennis went below 40 feet and looked toward the center of the lake. He told me he can't fully describe what he saw. Not because he doesn't remember, because he said the thing he saw doesn't translate cleanly into words. What he could tell me was this: it was large. It was not moving. It was at a depth that should have been nothing but dark water and silt. And it was, in his exact words, oriented toward me, like it had been waiting for someone to look. He surfaced faster than he should have. He was bent for 2 days, decompression sickness from the rapid ascent. When he recovered and went back to the team, Lou said nothing, just looked at him and nodded once. Dennis did 4 more dives after that, all shallow, all near shore. He never went below 30 feet again. He left the team in 2006. He told me the drowning rate at Ronkonkoma has never been adequately explained by current patterns, temperature, or depth alone. He told me the Unkechaug have a name for what lives at the bottom of that lake. He told me he's not going to repeat it. Out of respect, he said, and out of something else he couldn't quite name. In August of 2014, a fishing vessel called the Mary Kathleen went out from a small harbor on the Outer Banks of North Carolina for a standard overnight charter trip. 6 passengers, a captain named Roy, and a first mate named Deshawn. 8 people total. A routine trip, night fishing in relatively calm offshore waters, back to dock by sunrise. They never came back. The Mary Kathleen was found 3 days later, drifting about 12 miles offshore. All navigation systems were functional. The engine was running. Food and drinks from the evening were still laid out on the deck table. 6 fishing rods were still in their holders, lines still in the water. The boat was completely empty. All 8 people gone. The Coast Guard investigation that followed was one of the most exhaustive in that district's recent history. They found no signs of struggle, no blood, no damage to the vessel consistent with a collision or wave event. The life rings were all present and accounted for. Not a single life jacket had been removed from storage. All 8 people had simply ceased to be on the boat. What the official investigation reported, and what received almost no coverage in the press, was the final radio transmission from the Mary Kathleen. It came in at 2:31 a.m. on the harbor master's recorded frequency. Roy's voice, calm and clear, no distress in his tone at all. He said, "Harbor Control, this is Mary Kathleen. We have something alongside. Very large, not a whale. Repeat, not a whale. We are." The transmission ended there. Not with static, not with interference. It simply stopped mid-sentence, as if the radio had been switched off from Roy's end. Harbor Control attempted contact 14 times over the following 2 hours. No response. Official Coast Guard report listed the cause of disappearance as undetermined. That finding has never been updated or revised. Deshawn's family, his mother and 2 sisters, pushed for years for a fuller investigation. They commissioned an independent marine surveyor to examine the vessel. The surveyor found one thing the Coast Guard report had not mentioned publicly. Along the starboard side of the hull, just at the waterline, were marks. Long, evenly spaced, running the full length of the boat from bow to stern. Not propeller damage, not barnacle scrape. The surveyor described them in his report as consistent with pressure applied from something very large pressing against the hull from the water side. Pressing and then releasing. The Mary Kathleen was sold at auction in 2016. The new owner repainted the hull, but Deshawn's mother told me that before the repaint, she went down to the dock and stood at the waterline and looked at those marks herself. She said they were evenly spaced like fingers. She said they were the size of doors. Roy and Deshawn and all 6 passengers have never been found. The case remains open. It is listed quietly in a category of maritime disappearances that the Coast Guard refers to internally as unresolved anomalous events. There are more entries in that category than they publicly disclose. An island that shouldn't exist. Something ancient at the bottom of a lake that has been taking people for over a century. 8 people on a boat that came back empty, and marks on the hull the size of doors. Water keeps its secrets better than anything else on this earth. It doesn't leave traces. It doesn't answer questions. It just takes what it takes and closes back over and goes still. Thank you for watching tonight. If these stories stayed with you, if you're sitting there right now, not quite wanting to move, subscribe to True Crime and Folktale. Leave a comment. Tell me which of these 3 got to you the most. I genuinely read every single one, and they mean more than you know. If you have a story, something that happened near water, on a boat, on an island, somewhere that felt wrong in a way you've never been able to explain, send it to me. The link is in the description. I'll be back with more. I always come back with more. Stay out of deep water.